What's up guys, Joey here. I'm a historian of medieval history by profession and wrote my PhD on the Knights Templar. And today we're going to talk about the Templars and Baphomet. A thing many people believe to have looked like this or this or this. I don't know. It's great to have you. Welcome to Medieval. So seeing these depictions, the question now is who or what is Baphomet and was it really connected to the Templars? And if that's the case, in what way was it connected? I mean, did the Templars really venerate this thing, whatever it is, and by this somehow initiate the decline of the order? Well, we'll check out the historical basis of this story and see what this is all about. And why most notions about Baphomet you might have heard of are, well, straight out wrong. So the story of Baphomet is a popular topic among occultist circles and alternative historians. It's been so successfully passed down to modern times that literally no documentary on the Templars can be without a reference to it. Uncommon or weird-looking representations of faces or grimaces in medieval chapels are often identified as Baphomets and attributed to the Templars without literally any historical evidence. My most favorite example of this is this one right here, in a very famous Templar church in Tomar. The stone dates from the 16th century. The Templars were abolished literally 200 years earlier, and somehow people still see it as a proof of the Templars being connected to it. And we haven't even spoken about what this keystone here really shows. Whatever. Again, I mean, also the picture here is testament to how successfully the story of Baphomet has transitioned into modern days, right? Because this one here is like a 19th century depiction by Eliphas Levi. But let's start at the beginning. So first of all, the origins of the Baphomet are indeed to be found in the Middle Ages. So that's the first news. It's not entirely made up or a product of modern times. There is even a specific connection to the Templars. That's true as well. However, in the context of the history of the Knights Templar, the Baphomet does, in the sources that exist, only appear towards the very end of its history, namely during the dissolution of the order in the early 14th century, specifically in the trial of the French crown against the order. As you know, or maybe don't know, the French King Philipp IV set out to destroy the Order of the Templar. That was in the early 14th century when he sent out the instructions for the arrest of the French Knights of the Order on Friday 13th in 1307. The very original accusation claims that the Templars had forsaken God and worshipped a demon. That's what they were first accused of. This passage primarily serves to underscore the accusation of heresy, turning away from God, and to, basically highlight the heavy guilt that the Templars would have obviously incurred as a result. The point, however, is, in the beginning, the prosecution does not seem to have had any clear evidence for the heresy accusation that was made, right? Because what they wrote is obviously super vague. I mean, worshipping an idol? What are you trying to tell us here? Can you maybe be a little more precise? Well, no, they couldn't. And by that we get a really nice glimpse of the strategy that the prosecution is using, because it seems as if they were working with suggestive questioning. Meaning, they didn't have any clear accusation yet, but were merely guessing. And by posing this accusation to enough Templars, they would eventually get something out of them to further build their case on. And you know what? Interestingly enough, this is exactly what happened. So the interrogators, amongst a ton of other questions, of course, kept asking for some sort of idol in form of a head. And they kept asking and kept asking, and at some point, be it out of fear, pressure, or possible torture, some Templars actually began to report things. While the vast majority of Templars did not provide any information regarding this charge, the prosecution gradually took up the few statements that were brought forth by some Templars and specified the accusations in the next round of questioning. Now they accused the Templars most specifically of worshipping a human head with a long beard. However, there were not many confessions either, at least according to what we know from the remaining interrogation protocols. But still, answers of some Templars provided clues and further material for the prosecutors to build on. And these actually are really interesting. A Templar question in Paris stated that he had seen a head with a beard a total of 12 times, a weirdly specific number to give, I would assume, but whatever. Some other Templars stated that he believed that this head was the figure of a demon. A fragmentary statement that is preserved speaks of an idol with 3 faces that was accompanied by a cat. How different the ideas of such a human head with a long beard were in the conception of the interviews is shown in like a ton of further statements quite nicely, I think. Amongst other, the head idol was called a black ugly head in the form of a human head, a black head, a white head with a beard, a statue made of copper, a head with 2 faces and 2 small horns, a head with 3 faces, or an idol with 4 feet. And that's just some of the supposed descriptions of this idol. And well, that is, like, I don't know what that is, but that's very different things these people are describing here, right? So these guys were clearly not talking about one and the same thing here, right? Or maybe the question Templars just all had a really, really bad memory, I don't know. Also, what's really baffling about these statements is, according to the original accusation, this human head with a beard was said being worshipped only at the general chapters, which is the meeting of the respective superiors of the order. Now, this means that the vast majority of the members, namely all regulars, should never have access to it because regular members of the order weren't even allowed to join these meetings. The problem is, however, the majority of the statements we just heard are from, well, you might have guessed it, regular members. So the fact that regular and lower ranking members of the Templar Order report veneration of an idol anyway could mean then 2 things then, I guess. Either such veneration of an idol already took place during admission to the order, meaning all Templars would have been confronted with it upon entry. In the commanderies of France and beyond, there must have been, accordingly, like a huge number of such idols, which would have been presented to the newly admitted Templars. Well, but here it's worth noting that not a single heretical idol of any sort was found during the dissolution of the Templar Order. Not back then, not in modern times. And by the way, the inventories of the confiscated Templar items in the French houses are incredibly detailed. So, just so you know. Alternatively, the sudden knowledge of regular members about an idol has a different reason. Those Templars who do report on the idol may have simply made up things. Now, why would they do that? Well, if you were put through the ringer by an inquisitor, imprisoned for weeks and threatened with torture, you would probably spontaneously think of a lot of things as well that you think your counterpart would want to hear, right? And it's likely that many Templars just did the same. In fact, it seems most likely that the Templars, some of them undergoing torture, just gave free rein to their imagination when being asked about this head idol. This may very well just be what happened here. And of course, the prosecutors now made use of these new statements that they got from some of the Templars. Again. So this really was a step-by-step thing. Only slowly did the accusation sharpen its idea of the Templars' supposed heretical misbehavior. Now the indictment claims that some of these idols had 3 faces, others had 1, and some even consisted of a human skull. So basically a word-for-word usage of what we just gathered from the testimonies of the Templars we just heard of, right? But now it gets really interesting. Some of the interrogated Templars specifically refer to a figure or idol that they called, quote, figuram Baphometi, so the Latin protocol reads. This term appears to have been used only by Templars from Carcassonne in the south of France. One of the interrogated Templars even provided a detailed description of the object, stating that it was a gilded image or idol of a bearded man, and that the master had explained to him that this was an image of Baphomet. Another defendant whose statement is recorded states that the figure of Baphomet was painted on wood and worshipped with the word Yalla, which he claimed came from the Saracen language. Now, well, there it is, right? The term Baphomet in the context of the Templars. It's really, really important to understand, however, that the term is rarely even mentioned in the sources and is not brought up at all by the prosecution. Interesting, huh? I mean, if the term were considered devilish, demonic, or heretical, or whatever, one would assume that the prosecution would use it in order to condemn the Templars further, right? As they have done before. But it seems as though the term did not seem extraordinary or suspicious to the inquisitors. So why is that? Why didn't the accusation make use of that? Wasn't that proof of the Templars' guilt, after all? Well, no, it wasn't, because the few Templars who used the term did not invent it. The term Baphomet existed before, and the inquisitors obviously knew that. The term Baphomet pops up plenty of times in the sources of 11th and 12th century. For example, Crusaders during the First Crusade used the word as a synonym for the Islamic prophet Mohammed. There are a few examples of this use case, such as in a letter from a Crusader to the Bishop of Reims, describing the morning prayers of local Muslims. Quote, "The following day at dawn they invoked Baphomet in a loud voice. Raymond of Aguilera, in his Chronicle of the First Crusade, mentions mosques and calls them Baphomarias. Other texts also use variations of this concept, such as Baphomets or Baphum or Baphomet, depending on the language or origin of the author. It's clear then that when the term Baphomet de Mecca or Baphomet from Mecca is used, well, it's nothing else but a name for the Prophet Mohammed or the idol representing him. Crazy, huh? Baphomet means Mohammed, in a derogative way, of course. Depicting Muslims as idolaters was basically part of the standard repertoire of many Christian authors, especially in times of religious conflict. This also explains why some Templars used the word Baphomet. They knew it as a term for an idol, usually associated with Muslims, of course. This can, by the way, be traced back to the 9th century in Byzantine prayer books and later in works such as the Song of Roland, where a four-legged idol also appears and is even illustrated. Numerous writings from the context of the Crusades also report Muslims as idol worshippers. For example, in the very popular work Historia Orientalis by Jacques de Vitry. Another telling example is the poet Simon de Puy, who in the early 13th century specifically refers to one of the idols that Muslims worship as Baphomets. What really intrigued me now were the colorful descriptions that the Templars made of this idol. And remember, after the dissolution of the order, no objects were found that represented a strange, heretical idol figure of any sort. So what did the Templars think of when confronted with the accusations of venerating an idol, and what made them give these really colorful descriptions? Now, personally, my first association with the description of a human head with a beard put forward by the accusation was that of a reliquary in the form of a head, of which there are honestly numerous examples from the Middle Ages. Now, a reliquary is basically a container, often very elaborate, that contains one or more relics. These were of great value, and the Order of the Templars possessed a ton of them. In fact, a silver reliquary of a woman's head was found in the temple in Paris, which the officials of the French king listed as such in an inventory, without even remotely thinking that it could be something heretical. And honestly, why would they, right? I mean, such reliquaries were typical, often of great value and an expression of religious dedication and veneration. This Parisian example mentioned seems to have been a reliquary of St. Ursula, by the way, and the 11,000 Virginial handmaidens. Also, the Templars were very proud to possess relics of St. Polycarp or St. Euphemia. And the reliquaries seem to have been obvious associations with these accusations made against them. Also, representations of relics in their very pure form, such as bones or skulls, were very common and not at all a reason for accusations of heresy based on venerating or possession of these objects. What's also interesting to note is that some Templars described a head with 2 or 3 faces. Modern pseudoscientists have often used this description as evidence to support their theories about Baphomet and possible sites of Templar chapels or commanderies. But really, such figures with 2 or 3 faces were not uncommon in the Middle Ages. The two-faced Janus, for example, can be found in numerous church buildings, including the facade of the Cathedral of Chartres in Strasbourg or Amiens, for example. The head with 3 faces was likely a symbol of Trinity, representing God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Although this image may seem strange to us today, there are numerous representations and variations of it, such as those found in later centuries. Now, this form of representation was banned by the popes in the context of counter-Reformation movements at the beginning of the 17th century, I think. But it continued to be used in various contexts. Oh, by the way, one thing really excited me. This Holy Trinity exists in a twisted version as well. There's a form of a devilish Trinity as well. Crazy, huh? Here, for example, is an illustration from the Bible Moralisée, in which Jews, recognizable by their pointed heads, worship an idol with 3 faces and a cat on the shoulder in the background. Other examples of this devilish 3-face are found in architecture and seal representations, for example. It shows that some Templars may have had these images in mind when they were confronted with the accusations of venerating an idol, right? Therefore, a 3-face representation is not a representation of Baphomet. And it is no reference to the Templars, and of course, no proof of them venerating it. It simply isn't. Guys, in the end, the explanation is quite simple, right? The Templars were accused of heresy and idolatry, specifically worshipping an idol. This accusation was typically made towards non-Christians, including Jews, Muslims, and also apostate Christians, as well as, in this case, the Templars. One of the terms used for the heretical idols was Baphomet, which was originally an abusive term for the prophet Mohammed. A few individual Templars knew of this image and that term and simply gave the name they had in mind for it, well, which was Baphomet. That's it. Considering how infrequent the term Baphomet appears in the sources, there's nothing that really justifies the ton of references to it in connection with the Templars nowadays. Baphomet played basically no role for the Templars and has an extremely slim basis in the sources about the order. And, well, it wasn't responsible for the demise of the order either. Other accusations, especially the denunciation of Christ, of course, and the spitting on the cross, was what weighed a lot more heavy against the order. That was the crucial part in the case against the Templars. With regards to Baphomet, the vast majority of Templars had nothing to say about it, let alone put the name Baphomet on the record. The fact that there are computer games and fictional novels named after Baphomet is exclusively connected to developments of early modern times. So for now, thanks for watching. See you next time.